All right, welcome to another episode of Closers Are Losers. All right, today, our fearless leader, our CEO, my business partner, Matt Ryder, is in a meeting in New York City right now. He's actually in a meeting with one of our clients, Ryan Serhant. If anybody has ever read or not read, but watched $1 Million Listing New York, Ryan is one of our clients. We basically do done-for-you services for him where he has besides obviously his real estate and everything, he has a training program that teaches real estate agents how to be like Ryan, basically how to generate leads, how to brand themselves, how to become like the trusted real estate agent in their market. And we basically help him do that. We have done for you services on another side of the business that basically sells that for Ryan. So he's in a meeting with Ryan right now in New York, having some fun. So here we are. So I wanted to bring in one of our top account executives. His name is Christian Polk out of Miami, Florida. What's up today, Christian?
Nothing much. Just super gloomy weather. Tropical storm over here in Miami. Hurricanes in the northern part of Florida, so out of there. But
heard there was a hurricane going on.
There's a hurricane going on.
Over there. It's pretty crazy. So, I was talking with Christian, before we started here, and we, you're talking with all these salespeople all day that sell anything, right? From B2C sales, business to business sales, all sorts of industries. We're training 158 different industries right now. And you were talking about one of the biggest problems that you see salespeople have, and really business owners, when they have their salespeople that sell for them, is that most of them just don't have a sales structure. Elaborate on what you find when you're talking with these people, like on Zoom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of them, they're just they're either like winging it, or they have like some type of script that they kind of loosely follow, but it's not something that's repeatable. So they don't really know like what's going wrong, and they just assume they need to get a lot better at objection handling because like that's the only thing like they know.
When we run ads, if we talk about objections, it's like everybody's climbing over themselves to get that training of objections because they don't understand that really they're triggering most of the objections they actually get because they don't have a sales structure, or maybe the sales structure that they might use sounds scripted, right? They're off a script. And because it sounds scripted, it triggers fight or flight mode in their prospects. They don't understand that they're actually the ones triggering the very objection, trying to learn how to overcome.
Yeah. I would say that was the biggest thing that I learned, because like that's how like I found like 7th level, like Matt, everyone, like I was a new sales rep. I was getting a ton of objections. I didn't know how to go about it. Right. And then like, I just like, okay, I need to learn how to overcome objections, but then started going through the training. I'm like, I didn't even know how to fill the gap before. Like, now I'm like, okay, now I have a repeatable process. And like, that's when the game changed.
Yeah. And a lot of people, a lot of clients come to us and they're like, well, this sounds really good, but I know you train all these other industries, but will it work for my industry? And that's how we're able to come into any industry and get predictable, repeatable results for any industry. It quite literally does not matter the industry. We are training every single industry on planet Earth to get those type of results right now. It's because it's a duplicatable, repeatable structure, right? That takes that you as you watching us right now or listening to us right now, you're able to learn a sales structure that takes your prospect on a journey. And it takes them on a journey where you're the facilitator, okay? And you're kind of guiding them gently. You're guiding them gently on this path from where they are now. Yeah, as you know, Christian, what is their current situation? We call that their current state. Compared to where they want to be, we call that their objective state. What is their future going to look like once all these problems are solved? Now, the gap in the middle is only determined by your skilled questioning that allows them to see and, more importantly, feel all these newfound problems they didn't really understood they had. Or maybe they knew they had the problem, but they didn't know how bad the problem was. Or maybe they didn't understand the consequences of what will happen if they didn't do anything about solving the problem. So when you're on, let's say that you're, let's take out business owners you might be talking to, or C-level people, but let's say that you're on with just a salesperson that sells anything. Okay.
uh,
What do you find is missing in their sales process that really holds them back from like doubling, tripling, their sales and commissions?
I mean, I think it really does vary, but like the questions they ask, either first of all, they're not asking very many, they don't really understand the certain situation, and they're just like, okay, like these are the prices,
Yeah.
or it's just very like logic based, like, hey, like what's going on, that type of thing, or and they never actually get to like how people really make decisions. So it's like they just get lumped into the corner with everyone else, all the other sales reps.
They get commoditized, right? So what you're saying is that they might be asking like consultative questions, right?
Yeah.
But they're logical based questions that get a logical answer in return, right? So if you ask logical based questions, your prospect's going to give you what? Logical based answers in return. And like you said, Christian, human beings don't make decisions on logic. They make buying decisions on emotion. I mean, there's no debate in that in behavioral science, kind of my background. Everybody knows that studies behavioral science that everybody makes decisions emotionally, like 100%. That's the way the brain works. Okay. We go with how we feel. Somebody understands our unique situation the most. Okay. Yeah. So as you're breaking down their sales process, you're going through their structure. So basically what you're saying is you're finding their questions are off, or they just don't even really have really many questions and they just kind of jump in their solution. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a lot of times. Or they're just saying things that just like, lower their value or just kind of like trigger like resistance, like coming out.
Example of somebody you recently met with, like a salesperson that got into the training, that certain things that they were saying that just lowered their status in the prospect's mind.
Just like, coming in and just like, hey, like happy like we could meet, and then just like going like right into like their products and things like that. Like not really like really taking themselves and like understanding the certain situation, and just like not knowing like where to guide the conversation. Right. So it's just like, that prospect could have been talking to like anyone. Like they didn't like separate themselves.
Might as well have been talking to a rock or a wall or something, right? So what you're saying is they just don't know where to take them in the conversation. So they come in. How are you doing today? Let's say if they're meeting with the prospect on the phone, or let's say they're meeting on Zoom or even in person, they're just coming up with the standard, cheesy sales lingo. Like, I'm so excited you're here. I'm grateful for this opportunity. How are you doing today? Like when we say things and ask like questions that every single salesperson has asked them that's ever tried to sell them anything, how do we feel like how do we think they're going to react? They're going to be like, oh, salesperson trying to sell me something, right? So the red, it's like the walls of resistance automatically come up. Now, when you're on with them, do you feel like, how do you get them to realize that they're doing that? Like, what do you ask them?
I would say typically a lot of your content does it for me, right? So it makes my job a little bit easier.
Sure.
But it really comes down to like, is there anything like you would change about like the way that you're selling, or like really like the outcomes like you're getting like if you could, right? Yeah, so and then that's where like that opens up.
Yeah. So they start to see a gap in their mind. Okay. Because like I said, I think a lot of salespeople they don't know what they don't know. Right. I mean, that's the biggest problem in sales is the problem you don't know you have. Because if you don't know what your problem is, then how can you ever change? You can never fix something that you don't know you're doing wrong. If you think that, oh, it's just the prospects, or it's just the bad leads, or, oh, I just need to get better at handling objections. Well, why not learn how to prevent most objections from even happening in their mind? Because that's where true salesmanship comes in. That's where you make a lot of money. So so when you take these people through, let's talk a little bit more about sales structure. All right.
Yeah.
In your mind, like when you first, because you had a sales job before we hired you here, obviously, so you got advanced training. What were a few things that you started picking up from the training that really helped you the most in your previous sales job before you got in with us?
I would say one of the biggest things is like, okay, fully understanding like what their solution is, but also like what their consequences are as well, right? Like what happens if nothing changes, right? And you keep doing what you're doing for the next 3, the next 6, the next 12 months. right? And really triggering in their brain, like, oh, like if I don't do something like that, actually has consequences, right? So it's like, if you don't ask, they don't think about it. So
Yeah.
I think for me, like that was like the biggest shift that actually eliminated a lot of those objections from even coming up in the first place, or if they did come up, they're a lot easier to overcome.
Yeah, and you mentioned something that is pretty cool because that we're talking about objection prevention, how to prevent objections to happen. But let's say one does sneak through because it's
Yeah.
inevitable. It does happen. You're going to get some objections because of the structure you've taken them through and how you've taken them. You're bridging from question to question. It doesn't sound scripted. It sounds
Right.
natural, right? You're using what are called verbal cues. We teach all this in our virtual training platforms along with everything else. But you're listening to them like, okay, but walk me back. I'm not sure I'm understanding
Mhm.
that little verbal cue, like, that's a verbal
Yeah.
cue. That verbal cue allows you to transition and bridge from one question to the other where it sounds natural. Because what we see so many salespeople do before they go through our training is they'll ask a question and then they just sit back and the prospect answers.
Yeah.
And then they say,
Okay.
okay, gotcha. Awesome. Okay, well, let me ask you. Then they ask another question. And they sit back and the prospect talks. Okay, awesome. Let me ask you this. And then by the third or fourth question, the prospect's already feeling like interrogated because it doesn't sound natural. But if I'm like, uh huh, ah, okay. Walk me through though. How are you generating new leads and clients now though? Just so I have a better understanding. And boom, I'm right into my first situation question. Let's say if I sold leads or branding or something. That's just an example right off
Mhm.
the top of my head. But that little verbal cue before I ask that question just bridges naturally into that next question where it doesn't feel or sound scripted, even though that question is 100% scripted because I have it memorized in my mind. But they don't
Yeah.
feel that way. What do you feel? What do you feel that? What do you see from the salespeople that you talk to as far as like how they ask questions?
It's very much that, right? So it's like, it's kind of like in a rhythm and it's like very much like, okay, pause, question, okay, pause, question, right? Like it doesn't have like any flow. And as soon as somebody feels like
Repeat
they're just
back.
being
Well,
sold,
okay. So what I think I hear you saying is because that's that training technique has been around for 40 years, right? So
yeah,
when you keep repeating back everything they say, most prospects know what you're doing. They've been
yeah.
through rodeo before. All right. What's a couple other things that you picked up from the training, before we hired you that really helped you in your previous job?
I would also think like the biggest thing is like, how do you actually approach the sale? First
Yeah.
of all, like always like being professional and always like staying on point, right? But also coming from a place of like you're trying to help, right? And like that's what really changed like the way that I came off like so much more that I'm not just pushing something, right? I really want to understand the current situation and really see if this could even help in the first place,
Yeah.
right? So like people could definitely feel that,
Yeah.
right? And like that alone made such a big difference, right? And the way like just the quality of conversations I was having.
They start to open up more
Yeah.
because there's more trust. Now, what do you give us some other examples? Because you
Um,
talk 7, 8, 9, 10 different salespeople a day from all sorts of
yeah.
but what's another example of something they say or do, maybe in that first minute or two, that usually triggers a lot of sales resistance?
Where are you calling out of?
Okay.
That's something to where I don't know. Whenever I hear that, I know that person like doesn't really care. Like they're trying to just build this weird
Relation.
relationship in like this quick 5 minutes
How are you
before we
doing?
actually talk
How,
about
how are
like what
you?
we need to talk about.
Yeah, how are you doing today? Right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right because your prospect knows that you're not genuinely interested in how their damn day is going. And every salesperson who's ever tried to sell them asks them the same question. So you sound like everybody else. And when you sound like everybody else, especially when salespeople have such a negative stigma, and that's not because of them, it's just because of the way they've been taught how to sell that
Right.
trigger negative stigma. Because of that, when you sound like all these other salespeople that they don't already like, how do they instantly start to view you? Well, the same way they view everybody else that they don't like in sales. That's the problem. So, okay, give me something else. I mean, talk to these people all day. Like, what's something else that they typically do that they just don't understand that they're doing that just causes them so much sales resistance and drama.
Like something like assuming the sell, right? Like just going for it, like, hey, let's go ahead and get signed up, right? Set up your onboarding with Tuesday or Thursday work for you, right? And just like assuming it and just like going for it and just, yeah.
And then typically when they do that, if they're a lay down, they'll be like, okay. If they're not a lay down, which 90% are not, they're like, whoa, I'm not ready for this, or I need to think about it, right? I'm not ready to sign up now. I'm ready to, I needed to do more research, or I need to, get back with some companies you already work with and compare, right?
Right. I need to look around. I need to think about it. Like I just met you guys, or like just a lot of things come up. Like right off
I don't even know who you guys are yet. This is our first team. Okay.
So just a lot of things like do come up, and it's just like when they definitely, I think the biggest thing is like the people they're talking to, like they definitely feel like they're in a process.
Yeah.
Right. Or if they're not in a process, like there's just no gap being built, and like there's no reason for them to actually make a decision.
Yeah. If there's no gap, that means that they don't feel any pain. They haven't relived any pain because the salesperson's questions were so off. It caused them not to really relive any pain. And when they don't feel any pain, that gap becomes much smaller, right? When they don't feel like they have that much of a problem because your questions couldn't get it out of them, that price point of your services or products seems very, very high and the problem very, very low.
Right.
And when you're in that situation, they're going to give you tons of objections and probably not buy. But when you're able to build a gap from where they are compared to where they want to be, that is this big, if you can see my hands, if we're on YouTube, it's pretty easy for them to move forward. Is that what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. Because people typically they think by talking, right? People don't normally like sit there and like contemplate like how bad their problems are and what are the ramifications and what do they actually want, right? They might do it a little bit, but really when they sit there and they're asked like the right questions and they're, they actually think through like what are the actual like things they want and what actually happens if nothing changes, right? That's where that gap is built so large.
What do you see like once the clients that you help bring into the business go through NEPQ, like even a week later, 2 weeks, a month later, how do you see like what are they coming back to you saying like, oh my gosh, like I know how to do this now and the prospect did this? Like give me an example of they start to experience even in the first week or two.
The first couple of weeks, like they always tell me, like conversations become like a lot easier, right? Just from like knowing like the psychology and how we should like be neutralizing and just the way that we should just be talking to people, right? And I think they also start understanding that like it's not the lead's fault, right? And they take more responsibility and then know like, okay, it's a skill set thing.
It's a skill set fault of mine. My lack of skill, not necessarily the leads. Most of the time, it's not the leads. 90% of the time.
Yeah. Because I talked to a lot of people and I was like, well, the leads just aren't quite as good or things along those lines. And like I always like hate to break it to them, but we have people who are in their industry, really same type of leads.
Yeah. So like, can I make a suggestion to you, John? We train 158 industries. How many industries do you think tell me the same thing, that is the leads are not good? Oh, all the industries? Yeah. So just so you're aware, we have clients that call the same type of leads you're doing, get them from the same sources, and they're making 5 times what you are. Do you want to learn how they're doing that? See, it's getting them to start thinking that maybe it's not their leads. Maybe it's them. Maybe they just don't have the right question down. Maybe they just don't have the right tonality. And because they don't, they're triggering a lot of sales resistance and their prospects are trying to get rid of them very, very quickly. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. What's something else that they kind of walk away from the training that first 2, 3, 4 weeks where they're like, whoa, I now know how to do this?
I would say now all like having a better question process, which leads to them being less commoditized, right? So it's like if they do have to follow up with the prospect, it's not just a chasing game at that point, right? The prospect also wants to talk to them too, right? Instead of them constantly have to like chase people down.
So the prospects start to pull them in and chase them down. Whereas the average salesperson who's just, going through like traditional sales training, they're out push. And I think that's a big difference. Matt and I talk a lot about that, even on the podcast and especially in the trainings, is that there is a massive difference between putting external sales pressure on a prospect and your questioning allowing the prospect to feel internal tension. Okay. Internal tension is what you want the prospect to feel, not external sales pressure. External sales pressure is out here and it wears off. Okay. Internal tension happens psychologically from the questions you're asking them and how you're clarifying and probing that gets them into their emotional state and helps them relive the pain from where they are compared to where they want to be. And when you get them to feel that much internal tension, it's pretty much impossible for them to ever go back and not purchase because they don't want to stay in their status quo. And it doesn't matter the industry you're in. You with me?
Right.
Good stuff. Well, dude, hey, thanks for being on here. Thanks for filling in Matt's shoes. He's going to be jealous. We want you to be out there. I know you're over in the Miami area, so I think that
not too bad.
Right? So is it just raining out there or what?
Yeah. The worst has already passed. It was like a tropical storm, so it just rained a bunch. Like it's gonna be gloomy for the next few days, but should be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine over there. All right, everybody. Now, hey, you guys want to start learning? You want to start learning about what we do because we give you just little nibbles here, just like little nibbles on the podcast. You want to start getting some more resources to kind of check out what we do. Just join our free Facebook group. Go to www.salesrevolution.pro. So go to salesrevolution.pro. There'll be a link here on the podcast. And right when you join, someone on my team or myself will message you. Well, there'll be someone in my team at this point, but someone in the team will message you a free training called the NEPQ 101 mini course. It's kind of a list of different questions that Matt breaks down. Those questions alone will help you probably do more sales than what you're doing right now. And then we go live in the Facebook group about 3 to 4 times a week with different Q&As, different trainings that will help you. And then if you want advanced training, like Christian went through before he got in and hired with us, you can just message us on the Facebook group and you can book in with one of our team members to go over all the different training options we have. Christian, thanks for being on here. Well done. You're an awesome account executive. We always hear really good things from clients you bring in. So well done. And how old are you?
I'm 20, just turned 25 actually. So
25. Look at this dude.
Yeah.
25, helping tons of people. So congratulations, dude. You're doing good, man.
I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. Go to salesrevolution.pro to join the free Facebook group. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon. Hey, guys, if you enjoyed these, here's another you can watch. Join our free Sales Revolution group. Click the link below. Join us, and we're going to help you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you real soon.